My question to you is, and I know you wanted to say something, why do you think nobody's done it yet?
I don't know. Like it's insane that since I posed this to you over messaging yesterday, and I said, "Hey, I got some topics." My brain has been just running wild with this. Like I don't know why. Good morning, Dave Kittle here, as well as, of course, Tony Maritato, Breakfast Club PT podcast. We are live right now, 8:30 a.m. Thursday morning. There's some topics we're going to get into. How to legally and compliantly make $300 per visit from Medicare Part B. Anywhere in the country right now, you bill Medicare Part B, you're making what, $100 a visit, maybe $120 for the evaluation.
If you're,
if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Also, a thing that I'm kind of coining, physical therapy hospital. That's another cliffhanger where we get into it, as well as potential partnerships. And if we have time, Tony, anything else you got on your mind?
Well, those are amazing topics. I just want to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes and talk about having Urson on, because I am blown away that he said, one, that product sales was probably the biggest part of his business right now. I never would have imagined that, but I think I can't fathom the volume of sales for products, especially since he's on Amazon. And two, I couldn't believe he talked about selling the entire business if he had the right offer. I think that's incredible. Now, I know we can't talk about it today, but maybe next week, I want to get into talking about selling the business, exit strategies, things like that, because again, that's your forte. That's what you know best. But what were your quick impressions of Tuesday or Monday's episode with Urson?
Yeah, well, first of all, guys, go back to Learn Medicare. Is it Learn Medicare?
Learn Medicare Billing on YouTube. This is the channel. I'll link it in the description for this.
I'll probably remix the episode on the Dave Kittle Show. Go check out Tony's channel here to watch or listen to Urson's full episode. I was super impressed. I'm glad that he was open about it, because he really talked about, and you and I were kind of probing him about like, hey, how do you design? How do you figure out a product? Like his Edge Mobility tool, for example. It's just genius, Tony. It's one piece. It's one mold. There's no movable parts. There's no second part. It's just one part, one item. I wasn't that surprised in terms of like his total sales as they are, and that his highest vertical is the product sales. He's got a great following. He's done a ton with SEO that we talked about, and just social media awareness with his products. And then it helps that we were asking him about his in-person courses and seminars, which obviously help with his branding, his website, his product sales, and they're kind of all interlaced and interwoven into what he does. So I wasn't that surprised, but I was appreciative of Urson. So thank you, Urson, for being just open and transparent about his situation, what areas are successful, which areas of his businesses have the higher profit margin, the lower profit margin. We get into some numbers and figures. So you guys are going to have to go back to Tony's channel to check out that episode, the most recent live episode that we did. And anything else, any other takeaways from him?
No, like you said, I think it was great. And I think we see this a lot. The most successful people are often the most generous with the information. So let's jump into your topics for today.
All right. So if you're scratching your head, how could it even be possible to legally and compliantly bill Medicare Part B and make $300 per visit? I'm with you. I agree. Now, first of all, we don't even take Medicare Part B in my mobile concierge practice. With this next caveat we're going to go into, I certainly would. Here's why I would. Here's how I would. And we'll get right into it. And I have two examples, actually, of public. They're private companies, but publicly available data of two different practices that actually went through this whole process and how this is possible. So how the heck is this possible? Well, first of all, no, you cannot stay solo or independent and bill Medicare Part B and make $300 per visit. So that obviously, I want to just squash that. You have to do something different. The thing that's different would be you have to either own or co-own or co-manage a hospital contract. And there's a component of a hospital contract called Article 28. So through Article 28, you are a satellite clinic or an ambulatory physical therapy practice of a hospital organization. How do I know this? You might ask, Dave Kittle, how do you know this? What do you know, man? Well, here's how I know. Ben Gelfand, a practice owner, was on my show recently, and he mentioned Article 28. Now, he and his business partner, Mike Fox, they sold their practice, Star Physical Therapy, here in New York City. A very big practice. They were doing about 50,000 visits per year. Pretty big practice. They sold their practice to Motion Physical Therapy Group. Now, before Motion Physical Therapy Group became 60, 70, 80 something locations, that was acquired by Confluent Health, Larry Benz's practice, Larry Benz's company. Confluent bought them for $250 million. That's also public data online. It was Metro Sports Med. I was one of the 7 clinic directors. I was one of the directors of the 7 locations of Metro Sports Med here in Brooklyn, New York. The reason why I'm mentioning that
personally, wow.
Yeah. So my first job in Brooklyn, I was a clinic director of a practice called Metro Sports Med. They have 7 locations, or they had 7 locations. They were all owned by a surgeon named David Minch. So obviously he had some affiliation years ago. Somehow he got the hospital contracts to be this satellite. He got the hospital contracts from Methodist Hospital and maybe other hospitals, but definitely Methodist, to be 1 and then eventually 6 and 7 satellite practices of the hospital. Now, it operated as Metro Sports Med. It didn't operate as like Methodist outpatient physical therapy office ever. And Ben Gelfand, the physical therapist, the physical therapy practice owner, Ben Gelfand, on my show said, because through Article 28, Metro Sports Med eventually raised some money, and then they rebranded to Motion Physical Therapy Group. Motion bought Star Physical Therapy. Star Physical Therapy was a pure play private practice. But with the hospital contract and a component called Article 28, which, by the way, this is probably going to be part 1. I'm going to speak with Ben Gelfand today or tomorrow and some other folks. I'm doing more research on this because this is actually something that could be doable, and it could be possible. Because I feel like with all the challenges with Medicare, this is not pie in the sky, Tony. I'm actually making this topic today because this is something that we could all potentially benefit from. It would have to go into the later component of partnerships, which we're going to talk about. Okay, so anyway, so the hospital contract, Article 28, and Ben Gelfand, the practice owner of Star Physical Therapy, said, Motion, of course, they get the hospital contract because they came from the Metro Sports Med platform company with the hospital contract, and they were backed by private equity, millions of dollars of private equity. This is all, again, public available data. And that's why private equity goes in and buys hospital contracts, or they go and buy practices like this that are affiliated with a hospital contract. So let me pause there because that's a lot, and maybe there's going to be some comments or questions. There's more to it, and there's more ideas around it. But so far, does this sound like asinine? Does this sound something that, do you have any issue? I want you to poke holes in this, Tony. So what do you got for me so far?
I can. I totally understand where you're coming from. I'll tell you, this is something that's absolutely not on my radar in any way. And I think most of the therapists watching, it's not something on their radar either. Now that you're saying it, I go back through some of my memories, and I do remember there was a group that I know of where the hospital didn't have outpatient therapy services. This group was connected to the hospital through just personal connections. And they were a private physical therapy group that said, hey, let us do your outpatient therapy services. We'll come in, we'll connect. And of course, it was the only group in this particular town. So they got all of the business. Eventually, they spun off onto their own. Then they eventually became acquired by another larger corporate group. But again, these are the kinds of things that I think most of us, we're not going into this thinking of that. We're going into this thinking, I want to treat patients. I want to be the provider. I want to deliver my service. We're not understanding the logistics that happens behind the scenes. And then, of course, we get frustrated because we're like, we can't afford to do this. But there's so much more. There are so many deeper layers to this. So I love where you're going. I love this information. And I had no idea, as a new grad, you came out as clinic director. That's awesome.
So I worked for a couple years in New Jersey as a staff physical therapist, like
Gotcha.
2.5 years. Then moved from New Jersey when I got engaged. Moved from New Jersey to Brooklyn. That's a whole other conversation. Ed Mearsh, who raised the millions of dollars from Pharaoh's Capital, this is all public, to go take Metro Sports Med from 7 locations to 100 and then down to 70 or 80, whatever, and went from there. So he hired me, and I connected with him cold through LinkedIn. Another topic for another day. And he hired me to be a clinic director. So I guess I was still kind of a new grad, 3 years out as a clinic director or something like that. I don't know.
That's awesome. And for people watching, I will say that like at one point we had opened a physical therapy practice. We were not connected to or owned by the hospital, but next door to me in my physical building, there were 2 surgeons that were employees and owned by the hospital. There was hospital-owned outpatient therapy literally a mile up the street from us. And I was like, hey, make a connection. It's stupid. Why doesn't the hospital just come in and acquire this clinic for me? Now, I didn't connect with the right person. So the person that I did connect with, that was an employee of the hospital, said, no, we're not interested in acquiring you. But I really do think that therapists should be thinking in this way if they're looking to grow beyond just patient care and actually have a business that can be acquired, that could be an acquisition target. We're still in an ideal position for the hospital to just buy us out. I don't know why they haven't yet, but it's not something I'm actively pursuing anymore. And so go ahead. Let me hear the rest of this.
No, I'm glad you just mentioned that, because on all these other episodes, Tony, you do mention like you have a hospital right across the street. So I want to say, to just clarify, the hospital across the street most likely is billing Medicare Part B and making about $300 per visit in revenue, and you're making 100 or 120 or whatever, 109 or whatever it is per visit.
Let's talk about that. So in the comments to this video, I shared a link to another video that shows you how to check local Medicare fee schedules. So you can go see if you're not contracted, or you are and you don't know what the reimbursement rates are because you're an employee. What's interesting here, and I wonder, and you probably don't know this to this level. So we're an outpatient private practice. We bill place of service 11. With Medicare, like you said, I use PTA, so there's an additional reduction on the reimbursement with a PTA. There's a MPPR reduction. There's a sequestration reduction. So regardless of the allowed amount, if we do a 3-unit Medicare visit, you're probably looking in the low 70s for reimbursement. But that being said, when I said we bill place of service 11, when we're talking about non-Medicare insurance payers, there are local Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield plans. When the hospital outpatient, especially on campus, bills those plans, they don't bill 11. They don't bill something else. They bill 22, place of service 22. And when you look that up, it says, quote, a portion of the hospital's main campus, which provides diagnostic, therapeutic, or surgical, non-surgical, and rehabilitation services. The way certain policies are written, when an Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield patient goes to the hospital for outpatient therapy services, it's billed with place of service 22. Certain plans, it's a one-time copay for the entire episode of care. They could go for 20 visits. They pay one copay one time, $25. That same patient comes to me. They pay a copay every single physical therapy session because I bill place of service 11. The reimbursement, I don't know what the reimbursement is. I'm sure it's higher for the hospital, but I wonder if this is one of those things that's similar in that because the hospital is using place of service 22, I'm using place of service 11, they're getting higher reimbursement rates, but I'm not eligible to bill place of service 22.
It could be. I don't know that granular detail, like you said.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be finding out more about this. So I don't know with Article 28, and now you're saying place of service 22. It does sound like for Article 28, it's definitely for New York State. But from what I'm hearing so far, what I'm seeing so far, is it's probably similar across the country, maybe even the same Article 28 across every country, meaning every hospital, near you in Ohio and all the others, like that's either that and or the the location code, the service location code, whatever it is, all this is all tied together. And that's what you just said is a perfect segue into the opportunities. So here's the opportunities or a potential solution. Now there's kind of like, it's kind of like a crossroads. It's kind of like it's like a fork in the road. There's two ways to go, right? Well, one way is like Tony just said, which is you get acquired by that hospital system. Well, they're going to take over. They're going to buy more than 51% of your practice. Maybe they let you keep 20 or 30% and then buy the rest of that in, 3 to 7 years down the road or whatever. So maybe you catch a little bit of that upside. That's one way. I don't know if another, if that's A, and maybe one B would be like you somehow figure out a way to legally and compliantly partner with that hospital organization, but you retain 100% ownership of your practice where you can. But here's the thing, though, they have to come in with OSHA and JCA and all these things with like compliance and eye wash stations and all the hospital stuff. So your practice will change. It would change. I saw when I was with Metro Sports Med, and they had to literally install, things that were never used, an eye wash station in a physical therapy office and all these other things. And the compliance people were like, oh, you never know when OSHA or JCA are going to come in here and check this or check that. So everything's got to be up to code because, it's like a hospital organization. So they're going to be, it's going to be a tightly run ship in terms of compliance and all that. So maybe that's like 1A and 1B. Second potential option, other parts of the other topics of today, which is, could we physical therapists that are watching or listening, could we band together with our resources, maybe a hospital executive or maybe some investors listening to this right now, who knows? I don't know. I didn't even get a chance to look up before the show how many millions of dollars it costs to a hospital, even if it's a small hospital, suburban hospital, maybe somewhere, I don't know, in Alaska, maybe in Ohio, maybe somewhere where real estate is cheap or cost of living is cheaper. We pop up a hospital somewhere. We call it physical therapy hospital. And we can have, we can have surgeons. We can have, we just keep the cost low. Maybe we have like independent surgeons the way that there's a gym. A gym has independent personal trainers come in and bring their own clients and they charge, space or time, which is kind of like something Tony has mentioned before. We create a hospital, doesn't matter where in the country, physical therapy hospital. Obviously, the whole point of this would be to have the hospital contracts, the ability to have Article 28 and like you said, Tony, the setting code 22 or whatever, all these legal and compliant ways. We would have a team of lawyers to make sure that this would all be compliant and legal. We have this one hospital somewhere in the country. Doesn't even matter. I think it almost does not matter which state it's in. And maybe we have 100 or 200 or however many physical therapists, private practices, co-own it. I'm gonna take a little bit more of the lion's share because if I'm putting this all together, man, I gotta get some juice from the squeeze. But I would maybe have shares of this physical therapy hospital sold to, or all these physical therapy practices like Tony and all these others that watch this show. We band together, we create a small hospital, keep the cost low, have all the radiology, whatever's the lowest requirement for a small national hospital. As long as we can get that Article 28 ability legally and compliantly bill Medicare Part B and make $300 per visit. And then as long as we have that contract, you can cross state lines, I believe. Part 2 of this will be, if I'm right or wrong about this, but can cross state lines with the Article 28 if we have a physical therapy hospital in Ohio. But can we use Article 28 cross state lines, and then myself, my practice, or other practices that we partner with in New York State or Jersey or Pennsylvania or wherever, can we legally and compliantly use Article 28 to then have that hospital contract, that billable $300 per revenue? And if it's possible, it would be transformational in regards to access. And I mean that personally because we don't even take Medicare Part B. And one of the reasons is because I'm here in New York City and it $100 per visit. I'm paying my therapist $80 to $100 per visit. So we just don't even take Medicare Part B. But if this were possible, we would take it tomorrow. we would be able to, pay therapists more competitively. We would have more access to patients because we say no to patients that have Medicare Part B. So you could hear and you can understand my excitement around this. Now that I went into more, Tony, is there any other places to maybe poke holes in? I know the crossing the state lines and now we're talking about a hospital. This might sound a little crazy. What do you think about this second option, this other idea around this whole original topic?
It brings back memories of Health South. Do you remember Health South?
Yes, and listen, my intent would be to have great documentation, like nothing nefarious or anything like that. But I know that they kind of blew up because of too much focus on the finances and fraud. I think basically, right?
Yeah, it was a whole mess. I don't even remember anymore. And I think probably most of the younger therapists have never heard the name Health South, but I know a lot of the veterans are going to remember that. The first things that kind of come to mind is obviously this is a big endeavor. This is where, you would go, I would think it would go, okay, let's get some funding. Let's get a real CEO that has experience in something like this. Let's get a real executive team. Let's make this a real business. This is not going to be the kind of thing that a therapist would be like, hey, I've got some TheraBand and a license. I'm going to go start treating patients in their homes, right? So this is a real business. That being said, what I'm curious about, because I've got it in the back of my head, and I'll share it in just a second. What are you thinking in regards to what would be a unique differentiating factor for something like this? Why wouldn't a regular hospital just kind of come along and crush you? What would be the strategy besides all the compliance and the legal and the structure? At the core, what's kind of the strategy that says, hey, this is something that could be, it could win in a competitive market?
Well, the hospitals are focused on the physician medical side. They're focused on cardiology. They're focused on cancer. They're focused on orthopedic surgeries. We would have a different focus. Hospital systems really don't care about physical therapy. They don't really care about therapy in general. So the ones that eventually buy these hospital contracts, it's less so, from my understanding, it's less so the hospital organizations buying and rolling up the physical therapy practices. It's more the private equity coming in, understanding these nuances, seeing the difference, and immediately you get this hospital contract, and then you buy the physical therapy practice down the road, and you immediately the arbitrage between $100 per visit to $300 per visit, that just drops right down to the bottom line. So it's extra revenue, but it literally just drops down to the bottom line for profit. So that would be my angle, is that it's more of a financial approach, legally and compliantly, but not. What's competitive is that the hospital systems aren't really focused on it. They went through the roll-ups of buying physicians and private primary care doctors and all that.
Yeah, and I think so. My approach to this, and I've shared this publicly before, I think what somebody needs to do, I love finding that just simple formula. The simple formula, how do you cut off the oxygen for a hospital that's competing with you? You take the therapists. Like if you come into a community, take my community, for example, hospitals are everywhere. There are so many hospitals. There's 2 hospitals across the street from each other, just up the road from me. But when I go to those hospitals and I look at the clinicians, the clinicians are great clinicians. They're doing their job. They just want to treat patients. They don't want to think about all the other stuff. So whatever those clinicians are making, I'm just going to throw out a number. Let's say they're making $50 an hour as a staff therapist, outpatient, hospital. If I can go to them and I'd be like, hey, I'll pay you $75 an hour, knowing that I'm going to get a significant bump, knowing that if I can recruit those therapists away from the hospital, that hospital can't deliver therapy services. So I would look at this as, okay, stage 1, I look at who's going to be the executive team that's going to run the business and has experience in this world. Certainly not me. Stage 2, how can I buy a failing hospital right now? I guarantee there's got to be hospitals somewhere in the US that are failing, that are going out of business, that You're just coming in there to buy all of their existing contracts and resources and things like that. Stage 3 is then I identify a community where I'm like, there's 1 or 2 competitive hospitals. They've probably been around a long time, like my city. I could probably go in there, recruit those therapists, pay them 50% more than they're making right now, knowing that I am going to double and triple average reimbursement rates anyway. And I don't care if I even make money on the therapy, because this is a venture-backed investment. I'm going to make money in the big picture of things. And so, once I take away all of their staff, now I cut off the oxygen. Any referral they get, it doesn't matter, because they don't have the capacity to treat those referrals. Those patients are going to start coming to me. And so I think that's the key differentiating factor and the competitive advantage that would allow something like this to happen. It's kind of like what happens, when a Walmart or a Home Depot go into a city and then all of a sudden everybody starts going to them and the small mom and pop shops go out of business. It's just kind of the reverse. We're going in, we're taking away the hospital's ability to deliver outpatient therapy services, because we're taking all the resources and we're paying the therapist 50% or more. So it's a win-win-win. The only people that lose is the hospital.
Yes, I love it. Okay, so really quick. So here's a question. As an example of some figures of how this could be dramatically, it could be dramatic in terms of increase of profit legally and compliantly. So Ben Gelfand was on my show. Big practice, New York City, the biggest outpatient clinic square footage wise in New York City, aside from any of the hospital owned institutions, right? So they were the ones doing 50,000 visits per calendar year. He mentioned that on my show. So of that, I didn't get a chance to even ask him. I ran some numbers before this, but I want to hear it from you. 50,000 visits per calendar year, Tony. What do you? I have no idea, but what do you think the percentage of Medicare Part B patients would be from a random outpatient practice that's doing 50,000, like, or you, like, is it 25%? Is it 30%? Is it 10%? I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you, obviously geography plays a huge role. When we were down in Florida, we were 78% Medicare Part B. Here in Ohio, we were about 23% Medicare Part B. There was a huge shift, obviously, when Medicare Advantage became more popular. We would have been somewhere in the 57% range here in Ohio before Medicare Advantage. Once Medicare Advantage came into the area, we dropped down into the low 20s as a percentage for Medicare. I've got to think, New York, covering such a large area like that, wherever he was doing 50,000 visits, I don't know. I'm off the top of my head, totally random guess. I'm going to say he was probably somewhere in the 18 to 27% traditional Medicare Part B.
Perfect. Okay, so I ran this number before this.
Yeah.
I said 25%, which is right in the window of what you just said, of 18 to 27%. Okay, so follow me for a second, folks that are watching or listening. 50,000 visits of this practice, Star Physical Therapy, which was acquired by Motion PT Group. So we're going to take 25% of that. So that would be 12,500 visits per calendar year. Now, again, we're saying when you're independent, you're a private practice, you're making about 100 now, maybe it's more than 100, but we'll call it $100 per visit for Medicare. With the hospital contract, when Motion buys them, literally the next day or the next quarter or whatever, they're now making $300 in revenue per visit through Medicare Part B. So we'll say the arbitrage, the difference is $200 per visit, right? Approximately. Yeah. So from the 12,500 visits, so that's 25% of the practice, Medicare Part B. So 12,500 visits times an extra $200 in revenue for this practice. It's an extra $2.5 million in revenue, but all the other costs are already accounted for. This $2.5 million drops right to the bottom line of profit. So Star Physical Therapy, Ben Gelfand and Mike Fox, they did own this practice. And then as soon as Motion buys their practice, the next day or whenever the billing gets set up and they change to the hospital contract, whenever they do that, probably as soon as possible. And they have done it because this happened a couple years ago. Boom, $2.5 million to the bottom line. And right there is now on the money side, that's right, that's right to the investors. But like to Tony's example is, boom, that's exactly how you can attract and retain better therapists and pay them even more than the hospitals nearby. And we've heard private practices having issues with recruiting and hiring, and they can make more at the hospital. Imagine the hospital now saying that, oh, we can't compete with, physical therapy hospital. We can't compete. We no longer can compete with Kittle Maritato hospital because they're paying their physical therapists more, and now they have to, I don't know, do something different, or they don't have physical therapy. So then now we get even more referrals because they don't have staff, physical therapists on the outpatient side of the hospital. So pretty wild stuff.
It is. And these are universal concepts. Like, that's the most important thing to take away from today's episode is this is a universal concept. I was talking to a good friend of mine. His significant other wants to buy a little boutique kind of clothing store. And they're looking at pricing and they're looking at other things. And he's asking me, what do I think is a fair, multiple on profits or on revenue? And I'm like, well, so here's what typically happens. You do this and you do that. We went on the website Biz Buy Sell and we saw another kind of competitive store in a similar demographic. And this is what they were doing. I said, but the real value here isn't in what's always been done. The real value here is understanding what you bring to the opportunity that's going to double and triple the revenue and the profitability just overnight. So you and I have talked about it, where if I went in to buy a physical therapy practice, I am instantly probably going to get rid of all the billing and administrative staff, because I'm just going to absorb that into my existing capacity. Right there, for a single practice location, I'm probably going to generate an additional $50,000 to $100,000 that turns into pure profit, because I'm doing the job of those individuals with my existing team. I've already absorbed that cost. I'm going to launch some ads. I'm going to do some other things. I'm going to add some self-pay services. Without any real change, I'm going to instantly double, triple revenue. I'm going to dramatically increase profitability, even if I never did anything to the existing business model other than just add these new resources. So it's a no-brainer. It's a universal strategy. The question is, who has the executive team, who has the understanding, who has the legal team to actually put something like this together and make it work?
I know I can put all that together, Tony. I know I could do it. I know I can do it. And to the audience, with your backing and with your support, you may, and now here's the third topic, which is partnerships. You could potentially catch some of this upside. So if we created this team, we raised some money, we created this physical therapy hospital, or I snuck in there Kittle Maritato hospital, whatever we want to call it. We create this hospital, we get the contracts, everything is legal. We get an executive team that's done it before. Ed Mearsh, if you're listening, he's the one that took the 7 locations of Metro Sports Med, raised millions of dollars, rebranded it to Motion PT Group. He led that as the CEO to go from, and he came in externally, by the way, and he's an ATC. He's not even a physical therapist. So he's got a history, a track record. His whole life he's been buying and selling physical therapy businesses, and he's not even a physical therapist, which is crazy. But he's been in the world long enough with Pat Croce back in like the 80s when Pat Croce sold his 40 locations to NovaCare. Anyway, so whether it's Ed Mearsh or that type or that crop of executives that have done it before, it's totally possible. And then you watching or listening, in terms of a potential partnership, let's say we created this hospital, we got the executive team, we got funding, we got the insurance contract, we got Article 28, we got the setting code 22, all the things that Tony mentioned, and we had that up and running. And then we partner, but we look to you, the audience, your practice, wherever you're at, and we say, okay, well, I don't know how it would go where like maybe we would have to acquire 51% of your practice or not, or if we would have some legal revenue share and like basically the arbitrage between the $100 and the $300 per visit with Medicare Part B. We make some partnership and we just split that difference. That extra, so you literally by doing nothing, you could potentially you could make the extra, like of the $200 arbitrage in the middle, the delta of the 100 and 300 per visit with our insurance contract. Maybe you make an extra $100 per visit with your Medicare Part B, and then we make the extra $100. So we split that 200 evenly or whatever after costs and all that. And so you could continue to potentially operate almost the exact same way without any change. And we don't even have to change your practice name. You could keep your mom and pop physical therapy name if you wanted to, if that was our business model, depending on our executive team, if we want to do a complete rebrand roll up, or the USPH approach where you keep your brand name, your practice name and all that, which you might want to do. And it's just extra revenue per Part B visit that just drops right to the bottom line as extra profit, legally, compliantly, without doing anything else. And I'm super excited about it because I think this is something that could actually be possible. And then when Tony mentioned the other, remind me the example you just said earlier about if a hospital had, like, the patient pays one copay for the plan of care versus the private practice. If that's all tied into this, now it's like you're saving the patient cost, and they're more likely to arrive and pay and stay, or just they pay one copay for the plan of care instead of a copay every time. That's something I've never even heard of, but there's another benefit that benefits the healthcare consumer, our patients, to potentially lower their costs. So I don't know if you want to review that.
Yeah. And it goes down to place of service. If you're billing place of service 22, here where I am, the local Anthem Medicare plan, you charges the patient one copay because of the way it's set up in the contract and in the system. Whereas if that same patient comes to me, private practice, outpatient, place of service 11, they pay the same copay, but they pay every single visit. So we've had multiple patients that choose to go to the hospital because it's a single copay instead of 10 or 12. I have to think, hold that thought. I have to think the same way Medicare pays more for reimbursement to this entity, other commercial payers are going to pay more for reimbursement to this entity. Yes. We know United Healthcare and Cigna and other payers are paying low either day rates or capitated rates, but this is a whole new world. My question to you is, and I know you wanted to say something, why do you think nobody's done it yet?
I don't know. Like, it's insane that since I posed this to you over messaging yesterday and I said, hey, I got some topics, my brain has been just running wild with this. Like, I don't know why. The private equity firms and companies, it's like they know the insider baseball. They got the insider, the insider tract of like what's possible. Here's why I think. So like whether it's Confluent Health or Professional PT. And there's another example that I'll say in a second as to why, but the bigger companies, the bigger corporates, the ones that are already affiliated with the hospitals, they don't want the private practices to know, Tony. They don't want us to come on a podcast like this and talk about it. And another example, I gave the Motion PT group and the Star Physical Therapy example. I saw some other diagram, I don't know, on LinkedIn or somewhere, and it was showing all the big groups, who they're backed by. So all the big corporates like ATI and Athletico and whatever, all the big groups. And in New Jersey, and now outside of New Jersey, there's been a group that's been growing called JAG Physical Therapy, JAG Physical Therapy, started by John Gallucci, who I think is a PT, ATC or whatever. And then they had like somewhere around like 40 or 50 locations. They acquired or merged with One-on-One Physical Therapy, which was Brooklyn and Staten Island only. They One-on-One had, I don't know, 25 or 30 locations at the time. So the past 3-4 years, they were called JAG One. And now recently they dropped the one and now they're JAG Physical Therapy again. So now they have, I don't know, 70 or 80 or something locations in the area. On that diagram I saw on LinkedIn, they are partnered and or backed by St. Barnabas Hospital in New Jersey, which is near where John Gallucci started JAG Physical Therapy. So there's another example as to why. And to answer your question about how come no other physical therapists are doing this, talking about it, whatever, it's because the JAGs and the Motion PT groups and all these other private equity backed groups and the groups that are already affiliated with a hospital, they don't want you to know because then we would be competition for them.
Sure.
And then the other independent practices in the area now have, multiple buyers instead of just that one buyer. And those buyers, Tony, if this is not already obvious, they can pay you more for your practice. They can, the hospital across the street, Tony, you said before, I'll sell for 3 times earnings. You could say to that hospital, no, I'm not going to sell unless it's 6 or 7 times earnings, because as soon as they buy you, they immediately can bill Medicare Part B and make $300 per visit instead of your 100. So you could hold out. You could hold out and say, no, like, I know here's the EBITDA multiple that, if Dave Kittle bought my practice, but, or some independent practice owner, or Justin Stiver, if he buys your practice, or whoever. But if your hospital across the street buys it, you could be like, dude, I need 6 or 7 times earnings, because I know as soon as you buy me, you're going to plug me into your hospital contract and make way more. So the reason why no one's doing this is because it's like insider baseball, and the big guys don't want the little guys to know. That's why.
I agree. I think that's an element. I think to the big guys, this just might be too small of an opportunity for them. Millions of dollars to us is very different than millions of dollars to them. It's a rounding error for a lot of them. I also think the reality is you're just in different mindsets. The same way I think a regular practicing physical therapist today is like, well, use me. I'm going to use me as an example. I can't even logically think that I would ever consider going down that road because of the layers and layers and layers that you would have to deal with. And I don't have any connection to funding. I don't have any connection to private equity. I don't have connection to any of that stuff. It's just not in my ecosystem. It's not in my mindset. For hospitals, like you said, they're thinking cardiology, they're thinking orthopedic surgery, they're thinking things that generate hundreds of thousands of dollars per transaction, not things that generate $100 or $300 per transaction. Our fees are like them selling an aspirin in the hospital. They're not thinking about it. What were you going to say?
What I'm going to say is, yes, I agree with that. However, we create this physical therapy hospital, the Kittle Maritato Hospital. We now can cross state lines. We connect with any hundreds of physical therapy practices that want to partner with us. More, and we can potentially, now you're right, it is smaller. It is the aspirin size compared to the orthopedic surgery, the spine surgery in a hospital. Yes, on a per charge basis or per patient or whatever. Yes. That hospital, though, Tony, is only servicing a certain community, a population, right, of however many thousands or hundreds of thousands of patients in that community per hospital. But I'm saying we make the hospital, we get the contract, we go across state lines, we come on here, we go on videos, podcasts, we say, hey, here's our value proposition, here's how we can partner. And I didn't run the numbers on this, but it's like if we, with Jimmy McKay's reach, with your reach, with my reach, like we can get in front of more physical therapy practices across the entire country to potentially plug into this hospital system contract if we had it, if we owned it. Now the numbers become a little closer to equivalent in terms of total volume of the physical therapy episode, like per unit, per visit. Now it becomes a little more interesting because now we have the volume across the entire country of however many practices that would want to partner with us and do this type of a deal. That's where it becomes interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you see big organizations, little slivers kind of separate from it. They're niche specific. We speak the language of therapists. We speak the language of patients who want to see therapists. We understand that at such a deeper level that an executive in a hospital organization is never going to understand. So they're going to look at least I would believe, they're going to look at what you're talking about is, oh, that's a waste of time. That's so little money. It's not even something on the radar. But you take that slice away and then you plant it and you grow it into something big. I love it. I think you're on the right track. Not my forte, but for what you're looking to do, I think it's ideal.
Now, let's just say if some physical therapy organization came to you like this and they were like, hey, or if I came to you like this in a year or two, hey, we got this, we popped up a hospital, it's legal and compliant, here's all the paperwork, we could plug your practice in. Now, I know, maybe you're at closer to the end of the road of practice ownership, I don't know. But if someone came to you like this today, I mean, what would be, other than you have to change a little bit of what you do maybe, and we got to install some eye wash systems and some of this hospital compliant stuff. I mean, it would not change your practice too much at all. And like you said, I do want to double click on, we talked about Medicare Part B, but I didn't even talk about all the other payers. And you mentioned it, so thank you, which is with this insurance contract, it's a higher reimbursement for, I think, pretty much every payer. So the Medicare Advantage plans, the in-network United Healthcare, in-network Aetna, Cigna, Oxford, Blue Cross Blue Shield, whatever. So it's like it lifts your reimbursement per visit for pretty much, I think, every payer, every patient, every single visit. And you don't really have to do much. So if someone approached you for this, Tony, other than, yeah, we got to install some eye wash stations, we got to install this or that for compliance and more, better new fire extinguishers and, brighter exit signs or whatever it is. What would be the downside of it? Like what would you would say no, because it's too much of a hassle, or, why wouldn't you want the extra revenue that drops down to profit, legally and compliantly? Like what's the downside of this?
Before I answer that, the thing I keep thinking every time you say eye wash station, I keep thinking of a therapist accidentally squirting ultrasound gel in a patient's eye. We don't use ultrasound, but that's the vision I get. Okay. I think the reality of it is, you come to me, if we have no connection, no association, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. You're going to destroy the little bit of profit that I have in a current outpatient clinic. You're going to, it's too good to be true. You're going to put me on the hook for something. I'm going to lose everything that I spent the last 20 years building. Suspicion. Like, we are the most suspicious, most distrusting, most insecure profession when it comes to that kind of stuff. But rightfully so. There's been so many bad stories out there. I really think that would be the biggest roadblock. Now, you mentioned you, Jimmy, me, like, I do think we have a little bit of trust. We have a little bit of connection with the community. So if we started with individuals that we at least know to some capacity, we overcome that first obstacle, that first barrier. I think obstacle number 2 still is going to go back to recruitment. And I think anybody who wants to do something like this, you need to have a recruiting machine behind you. You need to be able to bring therapists on board. You need to be able to hire, whether you're recruiting new grads, students, whether you're recruiting therapists away from existing employers. I would never personally step into something unless I knew that recruitment machine was in place, because that is the biggest roadblock to getting something off the ground. But other than those 2 things, other than I don't trust you, this sounds too good to be true, and how are you actually going to get therapists working for you? It's a great solution. I mean, it makes total sense. Like, why are we still picking up pennies in front of a steamroller with these horrible contracts if there's an opportunity to create better contracts? This is, you and I talked with, was it Amit about this? And we talked about negotiating contracts and all this stuff. This is how we negotiate better rates and better contracts.
Exactly. So I think personally, if I were to do this, I would be able to personally get X amount of, at least a small number of owners together. But right. if I came to you and you didn't know me, I would approach you with, we would sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement. Then I would show you case studies. I would say, hey, here's the reimbursement of this practice of, Ohio physical therapy or whatever. Here's the date. Here's the date of billing. Here's what it used to be when they would bill on their own. And here's what it's been like since. Here's our, legal and compliance division or whatever. Here's what we do to make sure that this is not going to turn into Health South. Here's what we do to make sure that, like, here's a clear case study. Here's the practices, the private practice, the independent private practice. Here's their revenue. Here's their profit before this, when they were independent. Here's what it was afterwards. And here's a video from, Ohio Physical Therapy PT practice owner. Here's a video of them. You can call them. You speak with them. Another thing, by the way, that when I spoke with Bob Babb, so he sold 10 or 11 locations to Ivy Rehab. And Ivy Rehab was hardcore about connecting practice owners that they've already acquired in the past, connecting them to speak with potential practice owners that they're currently trying to court and speak with. So I would just do that. All this stuff is like, just copy the game plan of others that have done things like this already.
Yeah.
And I would get practice owners in front of you, Tony. I would say, hey, you guys speak. We'll pay. You guys go out to lunch, dinner. You guys get to know each other. And that might be enough for maybe not everyone, but enough practice owners to have. So you got testimonials, you got case studies, you got either redacted financials, or you sign an NDA so you can see those financials ahead of time. And then you make your decision. Like it might not be for everyone, but there would be enough, I think, that would be doable to show what's possible. And again, the legal and compliance side with coding and billing and all that, to make sure, like, here's how this does not become Health South. Here's how we just do exactly what we're saying. Here's the game plan, and everything is kosher and above board.
I think a couple of the appealing elements in this for a smaller private practice owner is you could basically talk to them, say, hey, you've been doing things for 5 years to 20 years. This is the way you've been doing it. It's clearly profitable enough to keep you alive, but it's certainly not profitable enough for you to thrive. We don't even have to make you change anything. You can continue to operate in the manner you've been operating, which is not efficient, not as profitable as it could be. We don't need more production. We don't need more growth. We don't need to change what you're doing, but you don't have access to our contracts without us. So basically what we're doing is we're saying, hey, let's do this partnership. You can gain access to a contract. You change nothing and you increase revenue and profitability. We take a cut of that, or you don't. And you just continue to do what you've been doing. If you're happy, if you're satisfied, if this has been your dream to work 60 hours a week and barely make more than a staff physical therapist, you're more than welcome. I'm just kidding. Don't say that. But that's the reality, is you're ultimately saying, hey, look, we have access to something you don't have access to. It's again, it's almost like you're selling the platform. When I think of Facebook, there are people that have built $1 million businesses on Facebook. Without Facebook, they wouldn't have access to the Facebook community. You take Facebook away, they're going to struggle, trying to sell their wares for pennies on the dollar. You're basically providing the platform for them to increase revenue and profitability, even if they didn't change anything. And I know we're running out of time, but if you can share kind of the U.S. physical therapy model with a limited partnership, if you don't know that information, I'll share it. But I think people would benefit from seeing how U.S. physical therapy kind of partners with individual owners.
Sure. I'll explain as much as I know, and anything that I miss, you can fill in the gaps. So U.S. physical therapy, there's only like 2 public companies in the U.S. It's U.S. Physical Therapy and I think Select Medical. I don't know if there's a third, that own physical therapy practices, that own outpatient practices as their pure play. Anyway, USPH, they acquire practices. They typically will buy 60, 70, or 80% of the practice. The owner keeps the remaining 20 or 30 or whatever percent. They eventually will buy that from them 3, 5, 7 years down the road, as far as I understand. The USPH model, the reason why you probably don't even know who USPH is, based out of, I think, Houston, you don't know them compared to ATI or Athletico or whatever, is because now they own about 900 plus locations. The reason why you probably don't know them is because the practices that they acquire, they allow the practice to, and this is their whole model, to keep the original name. I had a mentor, Rick Roscoe. USPH bought his 3 or 4 locations, Hamilton Physical Therapy in New Jersey. And guess what? To this day, it's still named Hamilton Physical Therapy. And the patients have no idea that it's owned by a public company unless they look at the fine print maybe on the bottom of their bill or something. But otherwise, they just think it's Hamilton Physical Therapy down the road in Hamilton, New Jersey. So that's basically like their model. 900 plus locations. They're a public company, but it looks like a mom and pop shop. And that's typically their structure of offers, to buy a majority component, but the owner keeps some. Anything else to fill in the gaps there, Tony?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. I'm looking at one of their quarterly reports where they explain it. A quick sentence that says the company, which is U.S. Physical Therapy's limited partnership interests, generally range from 65 to 75%. So in other words, the local on-site owner retains usually around 30%, just like you said. They keep the name, they keep the branding, they keep a lot of that. But what they do is they leverage their back-end logistics. So US Physical Therapy brings contracts, brings marketing, brings administrative staff. It's crazy that if you go into a town with 100 individual private practices, each one of those individual private practices is paying a ridiculous amount of revenue to cover operating expenses. But if all of those 100 locations were operating on one back end, you cut costs dramatically, even if you didn't have access to a contract like you're discussing. Yep. You just in leveraging that opportunity, you would increase profitability dramatically. You would increase, bottom line take home profits dramatically. Just that. I mean, that's a model in and of itself that I think is totally doable from a logistics end.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally.
All right. Closing thoughts. What are you thinking?
Well, thank you for letting me get that out today. I talked a lot. You balanced the episode perfectly. My takeaways would be, I don't know, message Tony and I, or comment below, comment on the YouTube, whatever it might be. Let us know your feedback wherever this is posted, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever we end up posting this all over, or at least when I post all over. Let us know your feedback. Like, is this something that, if you're a practice owner, is this something that is appealing? Is this something that turns you off? Does it sound like we're talking about money too much? Like, of course we're still delivering the same great patient experience. Like, look at my Google reviews for my practice and my therapist. Like, we deliver a great patient experience. So I don't want that to be lost in this whole discussion. That would be my main takeaway of just, I just wanted to present something different that is possible, legal and compliant. But let us know your feedback. That's really my takeaway. It's just like, I wanted to lay this out there. Let me know what you guys think. How about you, Tony? Any thoughts or takeaways?
Ray said, no, it's perfect. I love it. Ray, thanks so much for watching and commenting. I always say, like, there are more food shows, more food tutorials, more food channels than ever before, and Americans are cooking less than ever before. The term food porn became super popular. This is like business porn. I just love it. It gets me excited. And more than anything, it gets me thinking in different ways. That's why I love listening to the Dave Kittle Show. Guys, go to his channel, go subscribe. It just gives me the chance to think of things in different ways, see different perspectives. Even if I never would do the kinds of things that you do, it helps me improve the things that I do because now I've got new perspectives on it. So thank you, Dave, so much. This was a great episode. I can't wait to hear more about this. Guys, come join us. We're back on Tuesday next week, 8:30 a.m. We'll see you on the PT Breakfast Club. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Dave Kittle. Are you a healthcare business owner or physical therapy practice owner who is looking to figure out your succession plan or exit strategy? We might be able to help. And in fact, we may be interested in acquiring your practice. If you're interested, you can reach out to me. Shoot me an email at dave@conciergepainrelief.com. That's DAVE@CONCIERGE painrelief.com, or you can call me at any time, 646-781-8884.